Good evening. It is 5 o'clock. However, the number of participants is rising pretty quickly. So we're going to give it another minute or two before we get started. We currently have about 225 participants, but that number continues to rise rather quickly. Good evening, Matador family. Um, we have about 300 participants right now, and I expect that number to continue to increase as we move along. I do ask for your patience during this Zoom as I attempt to navigate the presentation myself as well as reference uh, multiple devices on this end, phone and a second laptop here. Um, I'm excited about this opportunity to come together with so many stakeholders to share some information on our reopening plan. Please make sure to provide us with feedback. There will be a link that it has been shared that will be shared again if you lose it, as well as on feedback on our reopening plan, as well as feedback on a possible delayed start, which I will talk about here shortly. I first off want to start by thanking our educators for the job that they did in the spring to just completely transform the way that they teach overnight is something that I am very proud of. I think that there has been a newfound appreciation for the role of a teacher, as we have seen parents who have had parents, grandparents, guardians who had to take over the role of a teacher. And I think that many came to the realization that the work of a teacher is certainly challenging, complex, and I certainly want to acknowledge their efforts. And they are continuing to work in the summer to prepare for this school year by participating in professional learning and beginning to plan lessons for this upcoming school year. I want to just start by talking about the current state of affairs with COVID in Seguin ISD as far as employee impact. Currently in Seguin ISD, we have about 30 positive COVID cases as far as employees. And sadly, we have lost one of our Matador family members. So I certainly do ask that you all keep this individual's family in your thoughts and prayers. It is certainly a very challenging time in Seguin ISD and in our greater community. Over the summer, since school has let out, we have been operating on our campuses and in central administration under very strict guidelines where we require mask, social distancing, along with other guidelines that have been set forth by the state and CDC. We have also operated on a rotating schedule as well, both at the campuses and here at central administration, to limit the number of people in a building as well as in schools and to minimize traffic. Even with all of those efforts that have been made to reduce the risk, we still have had individuals who have tested positive for COVID. And of course, we can't, in some cases, identify whether it happened at the workplace or in the community. The concern is that we have employees who have contracted the virus. If we go back to March when schools closed, most of schools in Texas, there were less than 1,000 cases across the state. When the reopening task force convened for the first time on May 18th, there were 48,000 cases of COVID in the state. Today, there are an estimated 300,000 cases, and those numbers continue to rise. As of July the 7th, the expectations from the Texas Education Agency was that Texas public schools would be required to offer classroom learning to those families who wanted their children in our schools, and that remote learning opportunities would be available for those families who do not feel comfortable sending their children to a classroom environment. That decision, along with the data that I just mentioned, really helped to guide the work of the task force as we move forward. A few weeks ago, we sent out a survey to parents asking what the comfort level was in sending their children to our schools. And at that time, about 50% of our parents said they felt comfortable sending their children to school, and 50% did not feel comfortable sending their children to our schools. I am certain that those figures have probably changed as this virus has continued to have an impact on our community. As a task force, we focused on 7 areas of work in preparation for the school year. The first area is school operations as it pertains to public health. The second area is school personnel, school operations as it pertains to meals, school operations as it pertains to transportation, academics, whole child support, and distant learning. The reopening of schools task force initially started planning for multiple learning possibilities. But then when we started to see trends continue to climb, then we came to the decision to put forth our efforts in 100% learning at home or 100% learning in our school buildings. Thankfully, we made that decision prior to TEA removing the option of hybrid, or making a decision for us that you could only go full online or in schools. So parents have that option to decide if they want to send their children to our buildings or have students learn at home. As you know, things continue to evolve every single day, and decisions are made one day and have to change the following day, whether it's local governmental decisions, state level decisions, federal decisions, even decisions when it pertains to Seguin ISD. What I appreciate is the flexibility and patience that you all have provided us. Because things continue to evolve, we had shared a calendar possibility that you all had the opportunity to provide feedback on. Overwhelmingly, the community supported maintaining the calendar that had been adopted. At that time, we were looking at the possibility of reopening as normal. However, things have changed, and the reopening of schools task force had a conversation about possibly delaying the start of school um, to either the end of August or after Labor Day, because things continue to change. We started by gauging how our staff felt. So over the past few days, our staff have been able to provide us with feedback on how they felt about delaying the start. We've had about 700 employees who have taken that survey, and about 80% of our employees feel that we should delay the start of school. Of the 20%, there is a percentage of employees who would be okay either way, but that is pretty overwhelming. And we are also offering you that opportunity to give us feedback. Now, we all want our kids back in our schools. They need to be learning directly from a teacher. They need to be interacting with their peers. We want our kids back. But there are so many factors that are out of our control. So it is important that we consider all of those factors together as a community and help our school board make a decision that is going to be in the best interest of Seguin. It is the time that we really take a close and hard look at what's happening in our community. We've seen the numbers spike in Guadalupe County, in Seguin. We see and hear what's happening at our local hospital. And so it's time to take all of those things into consideration. When the reopening of schools task force met for the first time on May 18th, they were provided with a 2-page skeleton, which has now turned into a 50-page plan that will be condensed into a comprehensive reopening plan that, once finalized, knowing that things will continue to be changed, it will be shared with the community at large. I am very proud of the work that this group has completed in just a matter of weeks in order to prepare for the reopening of school, with limited guidance from the Texas Education Agency, working in strong collaboration with other districts. Remember, we don't have a roadmap to follow. We can't call another district and ask for a plan that they've used. We're all navigating uncharted territory together. So I just want to take time to commend this group of people who have gone above and beyond to support our students. I also want to make it clear that the dollars that Congress approved through the CARES Act, where Seguin ISD was allocated $1.4 million, those dollars are truly not flowing into our school district to support unexpected expenses during this pandemic. Essentially, our budget is being reduced by the amount approved in the CARES stimulus package. I think it's important for the community to know and understand that we are dipping into our fund balance, our reserves, to support the unexpected expenditures to deal with COVID-19. It is our hope that with the next round of stimulus, that those dollars will truly come into the school district. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our school board for their support throughout the planning process. Last month, the school board approved over $600,000 to support technology devices in order for us to ensure that we can provide a quality at-home learning opportunity, but to also improve innovation that's happening in our buildings. The reopening of our schools is going to be a team effort with staff, with parents, and the Seguin community working together to make sure that our work and learning environment is safe for everyone. I'm going to go into our reopening of school plan, and just know that with the limited time, I'm not going to have an opportunity to cover many of the fine details, but they will be shared with you in the coming days. It's also important to know that a lot of this is going to be learned through living through the process, just as we have over the summer. As an employee has become ill with COVID, we have worked with the county, and other local health officials to ensure that we're taking the proper steps, following CDC guidelines and guidelines that have been set forth by the state. And we have learned by going through the experience. So in many cases, we're going to learn by living through this experience. However, we are making every effort to be proactive and think about any issues that will arise in the coming days. So the objectives of the task force, there were 3 objectives for them. It was to formulate a plan to bring students and staff back into buildings in a way that was safe and responsive. The second objective was to prepare for gradual relaxation of social distancing and prepare for possible waves of stopping and starting school, with the possibility of closing again for a short period of time to an extended period of time. And then third, to consider partial or staggered openings. The task force members are members of my superintendent's leadership team. They are representatives from departments throughout the school district. We had campus principals from all levels serving on this committee. And the chair of the committee is the Chief Academic Officer, Mark Ganthu. Now you may be wondering, well, where do teachers fit in? Well, teachers are coming into the equation after this opportunity to share with you all and our Board of Trustees last night. Campuses have selected teacher representatives who are going to provide feedback on this plan until the first day of school. Teachers are also going to have an opportunity to map out specifically how instruction is going to look, as well as write curriculum in preparation for the start of school. Now I'm going to attempt to share a screen if I can, and it's saying it's disabled. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, well, it looks like I'm not going to be able to share my screen, so I'll talk through it until I'm able to do that. So as I had mentioned earlier, the reopening of school task force really focused on 6 bodies of work in preparation for students' return. The first one, school operations, public health, school personnel, school meals, transportation, academics, distance learning, and whole child supports. The task force then created 7 different working groups that met throughout the last several months to really outline those specific areas that they focused on. Another area of focus was really looking at our academic calendar, in which we had presented an option to the community, and the feedback was overwhelming that we maintained the traditional calendar that had been approved. However, as time progressed, we began to have a little bit more concern about school starting in just a few short weeks. Therefore, we have placed for consideration the possibility of delaying the start of school. So if anyone can help me share a screen, that would be most appreciated. So when it comes to school operations, public health, There are probably a lot of questions that you have as parents as you're considering the possibility of sending your children to school or keeping them at home. Okay, so it says to try again. Let me try again. No luck. So what will it look like at a school should you decide to send your children into our buildings? One of the protocols that we would look at is pre-screening for symptoms of for COVID, pre-screening of students and staff. Now, we will ask that parents conduct pre-screening prior to us conducting pre-screening on buses and at schools. We will be doing daily temperature checks in the form of touchless thermometers, as well as looking at thermal scanners that can scan large numbers of individuals at one time. Because if we were to do it individually, that would take a significant amount of time. Keep in mind, too, that those thermal scanners come at a significant cost as well. Our teachers, as well as administrators, will teach and post hygiene protocols and make sure that those are practiced throughout the day. We have invested, as well as received from the state, hand sanitizer, along with other items such as masks. We will have hand sanitizers at entrances, in classrooms, office areas, playgrounds, and buses. We will incorporate scheduled hand washing times, specifically at our elementary schools. We will also require that masks be worn when inside and at times when students and staff cannot social distance. We will also take into consideration what is developmentally appropriate on a case-by-case basis, as well as looking at age level. The state has made it a requirement for students of the age of 10 and above to wear masks. However, school districts have the authority to make local decisions, and we feel that it is in the best interest of everyone to require that mask be worn. We also have face shields that will be available to staff as well. However, we do feel strongly that the mask be worn, as it appears that there is more research showing that the mask is more effective. We are considering dividers where mask or social distancing isn't possible, and adding plexiglass as needed to office areas. And some may be wondering, well, I've seen in some places, specifically in Asia, where every desk has plexiglass. Well, those come at a huge cost. And what happens when we get through the pandemic? We'll have a plexiglass graveyard. But in addition to that, those acquire germs too, and would take an additional add an additional responsibility onto teachers and even kids with cleaning. But it's really not cost effective to do that. However, we will make a determination on those as they are needed. Now, continuing on to other protocols that we're going to follow, in addition to what I just mentioned, we are going to ensure that our spacing is 6 feet apart wherever possible. Please know that there will still be challenges because classrooms aren't designed to keep kids 6 feet apart. However, if we're looking at right now, parents are saying 50% of our parents saying keeping kids at home. There will be flexibility if we have 50% of our students at school to maintain a safe distance. We will also avoid the sharing of school supplies and reduce the number of people in hallways and common areas, as well as create a staggered release schedule, as well as passing periods. Our campus administrators have already started mapping out how traffic is going to flow in their buildings. We will also attempt to gather students outdoors as often as possible, so long as the weather permits. Now in Texas, it could be 105 degrees in August, but we are going to encourage outdoor activity and learning as much as possible, eliminate assemblies depending on the local conditions. If things begin to look better, then we get to start making some changes. We will also designate a student sick area and ensure that students have privacy and protect their privacy, as well as staff. We will have an area designated for students and staff if there are concerns about someone falling ill. We will also limit and screen visitors. I know that's probably a question for parents. Are we going to have these tutors and mentors going in, and parents and grandparents going in for lunch? Well, until we get through this, we're going to have to eliminate traffic that's going into our buildings. And then we are currently working on our contact tracing procedures, which we've had the opportunity to work through as employees have fallen ill. We'll investigate direct contacts. We'll report to the health department. We'll implement quarantining as necessary. We'll notify all teachers and staff and families of students if a possible case is identified. We'll consider confidentiality. We also are looking at mental health considerations and ensuring that we have resources to take care of the mental well-being of our students and staff as well. Now, you may be wondering, well, what if my son's teacher is tested positive for COVID? What does it mean for my child? Will they still go to school? We're going to look at those on a case-by-case basis. For example, we know that a second grade classroom, there is very close contact between the teacher and the student. And it is very likely that there has been direct exposure, which could mean that that classroom would need to quarantine. Now, as we're moving towards more of a social distancing and direct teach options at the middle and high school, there may be less contact. And remember, people are wearing masks. So we will determine individually on a case-by-case basis whether a classroom, a teacher, individual groups of kids need to quarantine. School personnel, how is this going to impact staff? There are considerations for vulnerable populations. I'm going to talk here in a bit about the different categories of teachers moving forward. But for the staff who have joined us this evening and who didn't have the opportunity to join the staff town hall this afternoon, we are considering the possibility of staff working from home, because we do have staff members who are vulnerable, over 60 years old, have pre-existing medical conditions, may be caring for a child who has pre-existing medical conditions. So the Human Resource Department has created a form that will be going out to employees shortly that will need to be certified by your physician in order for you to be eligible to work from home. Those will be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And a teacher assistant, what is it going to look like for a teacher assistant who doesn't have an assigned class and there won't be as many students in a school building? Well, teacher assistants will still be able to work with small groups at school. They will have an opportunity to have access to students remotely as well. So I'm going to go to the slide that really outlines the different tiers of teachers that we are looking at. So we're going to have teachers that are going to teach at school students face to face, because we plan on having students come into our buildings. We're going to have teachers come into our buildings who will be assigned students who teach from home, and they will be in our buildings teaching virtually, but from school. The next group of teachers will continue teaching, but continue teaching remotely at home. And those are the teachers that I just discussed who possibly have pre-existing health conditions or fall in a vulnerable age group. And then the next tier of teachers could possibly be teaching both remotely and face-to-face. Now we're going to make every effort. It's going to be much easier at the elementary and middle school level to assign teachers to teach only face-to-face or only online. As you get into more complex scheduling, it's going to become much more challenging. Therefore, you may have some teachers that teach one period face-to-face and another period virtually online. Now, at the high school level, there are also courses that have to be done face-to-face. If you're looking to attain a cosmetology certification or a welding certification, you can't attain that at home. Those students would have to come to school. Well, what about athletics? I don't feel comfortable sending my child to school where there could be 1,000 kids in the hallways. I want them to stay at home, but I'm okay if they're in a smaller group with band or athletics. You will still have the option to participate. We have made the decision locally to continue the option to participate in extracurricular activities if you are learning remotely. Now, the guidance that we receive comes from UIL when it comes to extracurricular activities. So as of now, there have not been any decisions made to delay or to cancel any program, whether it's football or volleyball or band. As of right now, we're moving forward as of right now, but things could change. I'm going to go into school meals. You may be wondering, well, a cafeteria, there are hundreds of kids in a cafeteria at one time. What is that going to look like? I worry about my child going into an environment where they are interacting with so many people, they're inputting their ID. We're going to try to minimize those risks as much as possible. At the elementaries, they are accustomed to having breakfast in the classroom. We're going to continue with breakfast in the classroom and lunch in the cafeteria. There could be instances where there is lunch in the classroom. At secondary schools, they're looking at the possibility of breakfast in the classroom and using a variety of different areas to provide relief to the lunchroom. For example, they could use the library at the high school. They could use the courtyard as well as classrooms for places that students can eat. When you go into the cafeteria, there will be hand sanitizing stations at the serving line. There will be floor decals in all lunchrooms to designate 6 feet. We are looking at technology that'll scan for a student ID using their student ID card versus inputting their number into a keypad, and then using clear pre-packed containers to minimize the number of hands that are touching. We'll have to look at providing a few extra minutes in between lunches as well to ensure that we are sanitizing between lunches. So it's really going to take our principals really thinking creatively and out of the box to ensure that we can continue to social distance. If you are thinking about keeping your child at home, will I still be able to access meals if my child is going to stay at home? Yes, we want to continue to operate like we have with the curbside meal service that we've been able to offer over the last several months, and send breakfast and lunch and also look at sending breakfast and lunch with bus drivers on their bus routes to deliver to students who are not going to come into a classroom. I'd like to also acknowledge our child nutrition department and transportation department because they have been on the front lines day in and day out, ensuring that our students have access to nutrition meals. And I am so thankful for them and being willing to be out there in the public, and they do it because they care for our students. So if you see a child nutrition or a transportation employee, please take the time to thank them. So when you think about the high school, there are about 2,000 kids in the high school. If we have about 50% that come, you're looking at 3 different lunches at about 300 plus students. The cafeteria with social distancing will only be able to accommodate 168. So a high school would have to look at, again, a library holding kids dispersed throughout the building outside. And the same would have to happen at Barnes and AJB, because the space that they have in their lunchrooms is extremely limited. And with the elementaries, it is going to look different at every campus because every elementary campus looks different and has a different number of staff in place. So it is going to take a lot of extra effort to make sure that our lunch process is smooth. When it comes to transportation, how is riding a bus in Seguin ISD going to look? Following guidelines that have been set forth, you're looking at only allowing 14, 12 kids on a bus, which would pose a huge hardship because we can't purchase additional buses. However, the state has lifted a lot of restrictions for us when it comes to busing. But if we're looking at 50% or more of our students learning from home, that's automatically going to eliminate the capacity by 50% on a bus. But there are plans to ensure that our bus rides are safe by cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched surfaces and allowing for daily and regular cleanings between uses. Our drivers will also follow the same practices and also wear face coverings. Students will also have access to hand sanitizer when they're entering the buses. And we will also encourage our parents to drive their students to school, carpool, bike, or walk to minimize any possible exposure. If you are a parent of a special needs student, they will still have access to transportation. So now we're going to move into academics and what is that going to look like. So the state outlined 2 options: face-to-face learning at a school or online remote learning. Within the online remote learning, there are 2 options for school districts. There is a remote synchronous learning option and a remote asynchronous learning option. The remote synchronous learning option, which some of you may have heard of because some districts in the area followed that one, that is when there is a 2-way real-time live instruction between teachers and students happening through the computer or another electronic device. Students would have to follow a schedule, and what we've seen in districts that have implemented this learning model is you go through the day via technology. Well, that presents a hardship for many of our kids. One, because of the inability to connect with internet, device issues, and parents who are working, and parents who who cannot sit with their child and ensure that they are at the computer for those designated hours. We do not feel that that is the best option. We feel that the asynchronous learning model is the best option for Seguin ISD. With the asynchronous model, you can still have components of synchronous where there is live instruction going on. With the asynchronous model, it is where students engage in learning materials on their own time, interacting intermittently with the teacher via the computer or another device. In this setting, teachers will provide instruction and provide learning resources through a Google Classroom, our Seesaw. We're familiar with this one because this was the model that we had incorporated in the spring. Now, did it go how we would have liked? Absolutely not. Do we have concerns with how remote learning looked in the spring? Absolutely. But we have to also consider that we had to turn that around overnight. We've had an opportunity to live through it and learn and be able to plan to ensure that moving forward, that asynchronous model works out much better. In addition, providing support for parents and creating a website that has resources for parents so that you can better support your child in the remote learning process. How will attendance look? Attendance, we're still awaiting guidance, but as soon as that guidance is provided, we are certainly going to share. So we follow a professional learning community model where we focus on three questions when our teachers come together. What do we want students to learn? How will we know they've learned it? And what do we do when they don't learn? Well, we're still going to plan with what we want students to learn by revamping our pacing guidelines and for remote learning and for face-to-face. How are we going to monitor learning, especially for remote students? We'll still have assessments that are teacher created and district created, both virtually and in the classroom. We'll still use screeners like Imagine Math and iStation that many of you are familiar with, and use online platforms. Our elementary teachers are very excited about Seesaw. We're purchasing Seesaw for pre-K through 5, and then we'll continue to use Google Classroom for 6 through 12. And then what do we do if students don't learn? How will we provide remediation, intervention, and support? We'll build that into the schedule face-to-face, and we'll provide small group instruction remotely as well. As far as distance learning, all of our teachers became blended learning teachers last year, where they were utilizing technology to reach and access their students. Every teacher in Seguin ISD will now be running a blended classroom. Why is that important? One, the main reason is it's important because we could close for an extended period of time. So every teacher has to be prepared to become a remote learning teacher. Students will have devices to take home for blended learning. We are moving to one-to-one at elementary and high school. Pre-K and middle school will have devices available for checkout. Phase 2 of our one-to-one initiative will begin next year, where we purchase one-to-one devices for middle school. Students must have access to a computer and internet if they're going to be online 100%. The district is purchasing Wi-Fi assistant hotspots, that we will provide to several hundred students if they are needed. Seguin High School Chromebook rollout will start at the beginning of school, and we'll begin collecting their devices at the end of January. What are we doing for teachers? We're providing them with professional learning to support online learning in a blended model. We are ensuring that our campuses have the sanitation technology in order to keep the devices clean. We are also planning digital literacy lessons for all students. We are going to begin bringing in teachers to write our curriculum for the first 12 weeks of school. We have set out full-time online instruction expectations and blended learning expectations, and we will continue to maintain the Seguin Succeeds at Home website that you are familiar with. What are we doing to support the whole child throughout all of this? We are going to maintain our link policies where our students will have the additional recess, which is going to be very important to ensure that they boost their immune system And it's going to be very important because we want our students to be outside. We are going to continue to offer physical education opportunities both face-to-face and remotely, as some of our schools did in the spring. For safety, we're going to empower our campus nurses to be our campus public health professional. Campus nurses will provide a weekly state of the campus health message to our school communities. How are we going to keep our children challenged? We're going to provide daily positive action lessons and continue to invest in character building. We're also going to have several screeners to assess baseline and ongoing social emotional needs. And how are we going to support our students? We're going to continue to enhance wellness opportunities for students and staff through mindfulness. We're also going to have Seguin ISD training in youth mental health first aid and restorative practices. And I am very proud to announce that we are going to have the Hazel Health Platform that will support virtual doctor visits from the campus nurse's office during face-to-face instruction. This is not something that's happening just because of COVID. It is a huge benefit, but Seguin ISD will provide all students access to a health professional when the need arises through Hazel Health. More information will be forthcoming. And how do we keep students engaged? We're going to honor their experiences, fears, trauma, and unique learning that occurred. We're going to make every effort to understand what needs our students are coming with. And we're going to continue to promote participation in extracurricular activities and after-school clubs in all the learning models, utilizing a variety of platforms and platforms for interaction. Now, this does get towards the end of the plan. I know that there are still many pending questions, and I want to acknowledge that. Many specific questions that we hope to address through the development of a Q&A that's coming, thanks to you all asking questions. I know there are a lot of specific questions in relation to special education. Please continue to keep those questions coming. We are going to answer those questions for you in the coming days. Please make sure to insert your question into the Google form and to provide us with feedback on a delayed start. Again, I want to thank you all for taking time to be here with me this evening. I cannot go about this alone. The district cannot go about this alone. This is going to take a community effort for all of us to come together to ensure that we have a safe reopening. And I'm also going to announce that I am going to continue town halls in a much shorter version over the next several Wednesdays. So go ahead and mark on your calendar next Wednesday at 5 o'clock, where we'll provide you an update. As things continue to change and progress, I want to make sure that we are keeping the community informed. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. And from the absolute bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for your support and your patience throughout all of this. Thank you so much, and stay safe.